The following is a presentation of Morning Drive Media.
From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter, what is west of west and the shadows in the east, this is Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok, episode 82 of the show proper, but episode 6 of this Game of Thrones full rewatch. We have been diving into the themes, the lessons, and the moments of this show that we love so much. And please, without further ado, welcome back to the show, the always wonderful, the always expert in all things Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, the person who helps me remember, it was Viserys, then it was, then came, Jaehaerys first. Got it. It's Rachel Cushing. Hello, how are you?
I love my genealogy. What can I say?
You're so good at it. And we're going to talk about big casting news. First, though, now that I have you here, Rachel, you and I, we've been talking Game of Thrones for a number of years now. But we got to announce up top. We got to confirm for those listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube. You are part of the live Riley's Cantina, the live stream from El Cid, and you are actually going to be there at El Cid with us Saturday night, October 10th, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Show will live for a couple days. The link will live if you can't watch it live. We understand that's sometimes the case. You go to ticketweb.com or go to kennapzok.com, the events tab. You'll get to a direct link to the event. Going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be silly. Rachel, Star Wars. This is going to be fun talking something new with you on that show.
I know. I mean, Star Wars is one of the first film loves I ever had, but it gets lost in the shuffle when I, joined the YouTube community and did the Schmodown and all that stuff. And I'm known as a Lord of the Rings girl and a Game of Thrones girl, but I'm a Star Wars girl too. And it's so exciting to me to be able to talk to both you and Riley about it while drinking wine. I mean, that's another real big favorite thing of mine. So I'm really excited to see you guys in person safely, but to be able to geek out in the ways that we do on this show.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So everyone, we'll talk about the end of the show as well, but you can get that there. Tickets if you want, live stream if you get the VIP, you get exclusive shirts, merch, and a live stream after. And then there's general admission tickets as well. But enough of the sales pitch. We got a lot to get to. We're going to talk about episode 6, which is a Golden Crown. But Casterly Talk is still a Game of Thrones podcast and Song of Ice and Fire and House of the Dragon. And we got some big House of the Dragon news, Rachel. Paddy Considine or Considine, you and I are debating on which, and we did try to research that. He's been in a lot of things, The Outsider, The Third Day, but when I see him, I go, oh yeah, another person from Hot Fuzz in Game of Thrones. Rachel, he is playing King Viserys Targaryen. What do you think about this and what the show might be about? This is some fun speculation.
This is pretty much solidifying that we're talking about a series. While it's called House of the Dragon, we're talking about the Dance of the Dragons. This is it. Not sure we're going to get Aegon or Aenys or Maegor or any of that stuff. We might not even get Jaehaerys, but we are definitively getting Viserys the First and the tale of his 2 children who started Targaryen civil war, and I am very here for it.
This is you've been kind of banging this Targaryen drum, so to speak, of this is what you want, and I am looking at the genealogy right now. I'm cheating, even though I love Fire and Blood, and you and I have talked about it, and Thomas Rissling and I have talked about it. Love Fire and Blood. There's a lot of names, but this is, and he's being billed as a lead or a co-star, and hey, so was Sean Bean.
I know that's we've learned.
So. What do you think here? Because this is the dance. Rhaenyra, Daemon Targaryen, all that stuff. This is what's coming out of some of Viserys's life and life and family line here. So, how excited? What do you think specifically we might be getting?
The one thing I'm a little unsure of is how early in Viserys' reign we're going to start. I mean, Paddy Considine is, not a young man necessarily, so it does feel like, he'll already have Rhaenyra. And then do we come into this story? We'll have to have a little bit of history. We have to talk about the Great Council of 101, which decided Viserys would inherit the crown from Jaehaerys, his grandfather, rather than the son of his cousin, who was the daughter of Jaehaerys' oldest son. It got pretty complicated, but ultimately the realm decided that Viserys, as the son of Jaehaerys' second son, Balon, would become the king. And he was already married, and he had a daughter, Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Now we know his first wife, Aemma, dies, and the Hightowers, those scheming Hightowers, weaseled their way into the crown, and that's when Viserys married Alicent Hightower. And I think that's going to be our endpoint. That would be my guess, that, you know, the realm has a stable king. Viserys was well liked, not maybe as smart or an epitome of Targaryenism as Jaehaerys was, but generally speaking, the realm was in a good place. His daughter Rhaenyra was called the realm's delight. Like, everything's great. And then the king decides to remarry, and, you know, and there's like Daemon being the younger brother, it was also in line for the throne, so he's a big character. And then we have Rhaena and the Corlys Velaryon, and they're twins, and I could go down a rabbit hole, clearly. But I do think we start with the realm in a good place. We have a stable king. He has an heir, even though it's a girl. And then he decides to get remarried. And almost immediately, his new wife has a son. So what do we do now? We have a daughter heir who Viserys wants to be his successor. But now we have a son. And, you know, Viserys himself is the king because the realm decided to choose a man over a woman. The lineage went through the male line rather than the female line with Rhaena. So that's my best guess. You know, things are great until those Hightowers.
Yeah, so the Hightowers come in, and Aegon the second is this is kind of, it goes into that battle. Daemon the uncle, who also becomes the husband of Rhaenyra, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm looking at the line right now, and I think you're right, and I think what you're talking about here, we'll see how far, because I don't think this is just a flashback. We're going to get something. How far into a first season does that marriage to Alicent Hightower, all that, you know, the greens and the blacks, and we get to see all those events that we all love, and how they can really make it clear cut. You and I are familiar with it. You're really familiar with this line and the names, and I am as well, but then get lost in the shuffle. How does a general audience that's going, cool, dragons, Targaryens, got it. Whoa, what is going on here? That's an uncle. That's a husband. It's an uncle. It's an uncle. And it leads to this, you know, how they can get that story out in the best way possible in season one. That's the big question I have now.
And I'll be curious to see too, in terms of how fast do we get to, you know, the realm breaking apart. You know, there were a lot of dominoes and a lot of players, and yes, they have to simplify it to an extent. But I can only imagine that certain HBO executives are sort of salivating at dragon on dragon action. So how fast do we get to the actual Dance of the Dragons, the actual Civil War? You do have to kind of speed through some years, potentially, because there is an age gap between Rhaenyra and Aegon. So, you know, I'll be curious to see where we start, and then maybe they speed things up to get to those events, or do they actually let it breathe? You know, much like Game of Thrones, let the first season be about setting the stage, setting the pieces, setting the characters. Let's fall in love with these characters. Let's get to know them. And then when the realm starts to splinter, then it has impact, and you feel for everybody. And then you get all of the, you know, battle and epicness that you could possibly want. But, you know, that's a balance that somebody is making a decision about.
Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik, and of course George R. R. Martin's there helping as well, as he did early on with the main show. Yeah, you know, and it's funny, I listen to you talk, and I'm like, you know, I'm thinking the dance, the fires, the literal fires, the small folk rising up, killing the dragons, all those wonderful big events. But then I'm kind of, you know, we're doing this rewatch, and I'm here I am living in season 1 of Game of Thrones again. I'm like, you're right, Rachel. Take your time. Make the dance season 3. I don't care. I really would love to spend some time in this world and kingdom again. Kingdoms.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So Patty Considine or Considine, you know, you try to look this. I'm a good, you know, former Schmoes newsman. I look up names out of Sam, and sometimes you just roll the dice. But very funny too. So you know, it's almost to me a little bit. He's gone and done some great work in The Outsider and The Third Day, like I said. Slightly like reminiscent of Mark Addy being cast as King Robert Baratheon, and it's like the full Monty guy. All right, let's see what we do.
Yeah.
So, all right, House of the Dragon. We'll keep y'all up to date when this we get more information, more stories, more news, and more, which will only lead to more speculation. We are looking at episode 6 of season 1, A Golden Crown, and oh boy, Rachel, this is where things really start to pick up. We've been diving into the themes, the lessons, the moments, the things that matter, the little things that mean more now, the foreshadowing, and I just want to dive in with well, actually, as we always do, we'll catch up with the information. Original air date, May 22nd, 2011. Director, Daniel Minahan. Writers, the story, we got Benioff and Weiss did the story. They also get a writing credit, but Jane Espenson. You and I both have had long days while we're let's be honest with the folks. Jane Espenson, who's worked on a ton of stuff, including the rebooted Battlestar Galactica. She'd go on from this to work a bunch of stuff. This is her only credit here with Game of Thrones, which it makes me sad because this is a great episode. But I get she moved on to some other things. Yeah, thoughts on Jane?
I've loved her since her days on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I follow her on Twitter, and she's a very talented, very witty, really a strong fighter for women in the industry and everything else. And it was great to see, a female writer, elbow her way into this writer's room and be a part of this. And I think that there are some telltale signs, particularly with like Cersei and Dany in this episode that I really, really like.
Yeah, I mean, because you get some just a real brutal bad moment from Robert here striking Cersei, and I feel slightly more comfortable knowing that she maybe had a hand in really delivering the raw ugliness of that, and with some level of respect, as harsh as it was. And the show rightfully criticized at times for the way it handled some of these issues. And you see it with Dany and stuff at the end. You see the perspective. It is powerful, and this is her only one for the show. But I again, she went on to some other great things, and it already done, like you said, the Buffy. But I was focused on the Battlestar. Great career. So there you go. Cinematographer Matthew Jensen and editing Martine Nicholson. This is both their first go-around with the show. I was going to ask you this: you being a professional editor, Rachel, we've talked about the importance of editing. Editing for a show. Scripted, non-scripted, doesn't matter. When there's a bunch of editors working on one show, can you shed some insight and light onto what it's like to kind of work on that in that situation where there's maybe 2 or 3 or more of you working on one show to capture the look, but you're also passing the baton around episode to episode? Just what's your thoughts on that and the importance of it? Because editing is everything for a lot of these shows and movies.
Yeah, based on the schedules for these kinds of shows, one editor can't possibly do 10 hours. Right. For the season. So there's usually, I think on Game of Thrones, they had 2 to 3 editors a season, depending on a variety of things. But, like almost everything in filmmaking, television making, communication is key. You have to constantly be in contact with the other editors. It's a little bit easier in scripted because things are planned out in advance. But you're still looking for the through lines. You're looking for the threads. As you edit footage, the lines are important. They're all there. But the choices you're often making are, who are you with when they're delivering a line? Are you with the person delivering the line, or are you on a reaction shot from the person who's receiving that line? And it's about point of view. And it's about, keeping point of views, keeping those arcs intact over the courses of the seasons. So it's just about talking to the other editors. And then, of course, you have leaders like David and Dan who are jumping from edit bay to edit bay saying, look, we made this decision in this episode, which airs before yours. We'd like to keep that through line going in your episode. So you definitely have a feel of continuity. But then each of these episodes are in and of themselves mini movies. And so that's why you have the one editor on one episode, because then they're keeping it all, straight for themselves. So, bottom line, communication is key and leadership is key to keep it all, under the same umbrella.
It's just one more thing for all properties. Again, this is your line of work. You're by the way, an award-winning editor, we should say, right? It's just one of the things, though, when I look at this show and going back to look at it, it is one of those things that you just don't think about. It's not the glitz and glamour side of it. It is these editors at their bays, in the rooms, working with the producers to really capture the look and feel. And it's always, this show, other than one misplaced coffee cup, which was a whole bunch of failures, but no one person. This show just it is consistently every episode. You just feel the great editing that goes into it, and I'm a layman when it comes to that. You're probably watching it going, good choice. Is that a Jansen? That's a Jansen cut. I got it. So there you go. Just wanted to ask you about that. All right, let's dive into A Golden Crown. This is one of my favorite episodes. I want to know right from you, Rachel, some of the themes that jumped out to you so we can discuss.
There were some episodes when you're watching themes sort of come at you in terms of general terms. Sometimes I feel a little hit over the head with it, with like words. So like I took away some key words from this episode. One of them being justice. A lot is done in the name of justice in this episode. Like it's put that way. That's it. Ned is, passing justice and judgment in the name of the king. Robert himself is actually kind of afraid to do it in the opening scene because he's got his hand and his wife at each other's throats because, everybody is starting this ball rolling with the Lannisters versus the Starks. And he basically just doesn't want to deal with it. And he just goes on a hunt to avoid any, actually following through on any kind of justice. Tyrion is asking Lysa, is this how you do justice in the Vale, by keeping me in a sky cell after having accused me, and then just what? That's not real justice. But then Bronn stands up for Tyrion, and his form of justice is a little bit different. So it's all in the eye of the beholder. But I was struck by how many people talked about it very specifically, and then in a more broad sense, how often it comes up in terms of the normal Game of Thrones, through the normal Game of Thrones lens, which is it's not black and white. It's not cut and dry. It's all depending on who's dispensing the justice, who the justice is for, and is it used or misused or misrepresented. There's so much in there, but it definitely stuck out to me as coming up an awful lot in this episode.
You're absolutely right, because sometimes you have to dig and find the through lens, but otherwise other times you have those words. And I think it was episode 2 was honor. Just you're being hit over the head with it. Yeah, justice comes up a lot, and I wanted to. One of my themes kind of was tying into that, and it's more of a question of the idea of fighting with honor. I'm jumping to Bronn here, and I think it plugs into what you're saying here. Bronn is capital all caps is the dirty player here with Vardis Egan. Sir Vardis is a knight of the Vale. He's even chivalrous. I don't want to kill the imp. That wouldn't be fair. I'll fight anyone else. Bronn shows up, wins. This is one of my favorite sequences. We can talk about that a little bit later, and then Bronn gets, understandably, I'm saying, maybe some quotes around that, accused of not fighting with honor by Lysa. And he fought with honor, and he's down the moon door. But do you think, going to your idea of justice, Bronn, he's a sellsword, he's smart, he already took the gold for the room for Tyrion, he was going to do that, now he's friends with Tyrion, and he's watching Tyrion give his big confession speech, and Bronn's laughing, but kind of right from the get-go just sees, I get what he's doing, I see what's going on here. Do you think, especially watching now, that the arm is actually swinging in Bronn's way, where he's just like, all this is false and a farce, and my honor is actual true justice here? That's the way I'm kind of taking it now. Any thoughts or even a counter to that?
I'm not sure he thinks about it in such specific terms. I think that he's got a view of the world, much like somebody like the Hound does. The world has treated him in such a way, and he's been like, well, screw the world. I'm going to go through it, in whatever way I need to survive given my circumstances. And that's survival is all over the show. Like everybody is doing that. But he's not noble, and we don't have a ton of small folk characters. And so he is one of our endpoints to that way of looking at things. And he's the cynical one. He's the one who's like, I'm basically interested in women and money. And, if fighting gets me one or both of those, great. and I'm actually kind of good at it because I'm not going to take this super seriously. I'm not going to be chivalrous about it. I'm not a knight. Like, I can't be those things because the world has told me I can't be because I'm not a noble. Well, screw you, nobles. I'm going to live it my way.
Yeah.
And, and he's kind of living proof. And I think that they loved this so much that that's why he survives the whole series.
Yeah.
The way that he does, because it's a very valid viewpoint that we don't have a lot of, because most of our main characters are from the noble houses, and you kind of need that viewpoint. I think the same thing is why Roz becomes a little bit more of a focal character than maybe they originally intended. I mean, she has that little scene with Theon in this one, but it shows that she's also very aware of the world, the way the world really works. The Starks and the Lannisters are at each other's throats. That means war. That means all the men in the north are going to be traveling south, and most of them are not coming back. Where does that leave me, a whore? Well, I'm going to take my own life into my own hands, and I'm going to find a better situation. I'm like, you got to understand that, And so I think that that's the interesting thing about having a Bronn-like character. And then even more interesting is this relationship with Tyrion, because Tyrion is a lord, but he's a dwarf. And so he has a similar outlook in terms of the world tells me one thing about me, that I am a certain way because of how I look. So I'm going to turn that to my advantage, and I'm going to use my books and my brains to manipulate my way out of circumstances, just like he did in this situation. So, I mean, him and Bronn are a match made in heaven. I mean, who are we kidding?
This is absolutely one of my favorite sequences. No, that insight is great. And you're through characters like Bronn, we're looking up at the lords and the ladies and really getting that viewpoint that, Jorah mentions in the previous episode to Dany about, the small folk don't really care about the Game of Thrones, paraphrasing, of course, but just to have that with Bronn. Jerome Flynn, he's one of my stars of this episode for sure. Everything about it. I love his reactions, and I love right before he sticks that sword in Ser Vardis, he kind of looks around and has that beat of just like, all right, this is what y'all want. This is what y'all can get, and here's justice. Here's what it really is. That's great. Great way to start discussing any other viewpoints on justice in this episode that jumped out to you.
I'll mention it now, but it's one of my favorite moments, so I can come back to it. But there is a back and forth between Theon and Robb while Bran is riding the horse, and Theon is like gung ho about riding south, starting a war, blood for blood, got to go after those Lannisters. And Robb's like, you're talking about war. And Theon says, no, I'm talking about justice. I'm like, that's really interesting that that's how you see it. And it's not really how Theon sees it. We're going to find out that Theon doesn't have a true concept of justice just yet. He has too much of an identity crisis going on, So he's probably, it's like one of those things where you spew words that you think mean what you want them to mean, but don't actually mean that. And it's a lesson that he's going to eventually learn. But I do love the warring viewpoints. Like when people go to war, what are the justifications? And the provocation of Catelyn kidnapping Tyrion, or Jaime going after the Starks and killing Ned's men and hurting him, all of this gets rolled up, and now everybody is like, what it's that history belongs to the victors, or is told by the victors. It's also indicative in that scene where Cersei and Robert are by Ned's bedside, and Cersei lies, outright lies, and tells a different version of events, which is the version she's going to spread around to justify Ned was drunk coming out of a brothel and attacked Jaime's men. That's not what happened. But if the Lannisters win this war, that's what happened. And that's how history. And that's like, it's one of my favorite things about Martin is he recognizes history's written by the victors. And so he's showing us that as it's happening. And for us, it's so like you get so angry and on Ned's behalf, you're like, no, that's not what happened. But as far as the world is concerned, that is the version that will likely, win the day. And it's fascinating. It's one of the best parts of these stories.
Yeah.
And all of this gets tied into that. So again, like, what is justice? Who is administering justice? In whose name? Why? You can argue your way into that because you're the one who comes out on the other side.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking of Cersei and her scene with Joffrey. Was it episode 3 of when you're king, history will be whatever you want it to be.
Right.
It's your world. The lesson learned there. A lot going on there. Yeah, I definitely want to come back to that Rob and Theon scene because there's some other stuff in there that some other angles to that scene I want to discuss too. One of the themes that I have here, and we'll ping pong our themes here. Was and this I will say, this came from watching. I love watching those inside the episode things after. And DB Weiss is the one who says this episode, he calls it the top of the roller coaster, and we've hit the top and we're starting to go down. And to me, the theme of the downward spiral, which to me is kind of these fatal mistakes that these characters have made or are in the process of making that you can't necessarily come back from, and a roll call with some of them for me, and then we could dive in here, Rachel, on what you think about this, and I'm sure some have missed. I'm talking big and small of just King Robert. We talked about that scene, but King Robert slapping Cersei to me is a loss of humanity, and Ned's face is
very telling,
and it's like, who are you? It's not good, and Robert gives kind of the faux, I shouldn't have done that, it wasn't kingly, but beyond that, it's to me, it's one step too far. And now, like you said, now he doesn't even want to be around to deal with repercussions of that, repercussions of what he's got to do. Doesn't want to serve justice. He's going to run away. We know leads to his death. And to me, this is one of those. Now we're sliding. He is too far, and that hit. It's not a small hit to me. It is not, and nor should it be, by the way. But just like that, Ned's reaction is this ain't Robert. His humanity is gone. I don't know who this guy is. Yeah.
And it's our moment to feel for Cersei, because her response to me is what makes it work, along with Ned's look. But like, I'll wear this as a badge of honor. So you just know that this has happened before. You know that this is what she's dealing with. I'm not saying she didn't necessarily, deserve to be treated in a way that calls her on her BS.
Yeah,
but doesn't deserve to be hit like that. And you can see that, in all of her machinations, and, as we will find out relatively quickly, that she's behind the death of Robert. Right. I've often said about Cersei, I'm like, it doesn't vindicate her. It doesn't, she's still a villain.
Yeah.
But I understand her more when you have moments like this happen. And Robert is such a coward for the supposedly brave person that he was, in what he accomplished during, the rebellion. He runs and hides from all of this. If he can't kill it to solve the problem, if he can't kill a person to solve the problem, then he doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately not good for anybody in this situation. But Cersei and the Lannisters are the ones that take control of it and basically said, all right, getting rid of this, because it's not even just, not helping the realm, but he's right in our way too.
Yeah, a lot going on. No, and and she tells Joffrey in that, in that same speech we're referencing, of just, a little nicety will work. And I take that as a lot of different ways, but also kind of Cersei saying, if your dad was nicer to me, I would be planning to kill him as well. Maybe. Well, some other ones here. We got Catelyn has put her faith in her sister and now has lost her bargaining chip with Tyrion. She's already kind of like, I put my faith in maybe the wrong thing, and starts to spiral out of control for her. Viserys, oh boy, he's slid down the slope for good, as we know. We're going to talk about that end scene. He's made so many mistakes he can't return from. Ned keeps asking questions, but Ned, the justice, and you talked about this Ned's justice stepping in for the king. And we can talk about he strips Gregor Clegane. He sends Beric Dondarrion out. That's something more foreshadowing. But he's fallen into Baelish's chaos plans. He is the roller coaster's off the rails for him. He just doesn't see it because he's doing something that I would think is good in his mind and his heart. But he's not going to recover from this one. And he's gone maybe too far. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that the episode goes out of its way to point out that Ned has taken a step too far in this.
Yeah.
You know, he's on the border already by resigning the handship and having the whole issue with Jamie. You know, Robert threatens him before he leaves, is like, you know, take this bat and you back and you'll never quit again, or I'll pin the damn thing on you myself. Like, he's not learning the Game of Thrones, the way that this is all really supposed to be done. And Peter's playing him like a fiddle, and it's actually really hard to watch. It's so obvious, but Ned is so disillusioned by Robert that to have this moment of power is almost like, I'm going to right all the wrongs with this one big decision. Yes. And it's a huge swing too far, because I love the exchange that he has with Peter, where Peter says money wins wars, and Ned comes back with, then why is Robert king and not Tywin, who we get pointed out all up and down this episode how rich the Lannisters are. I mean, Tyrion does it, like it's everywhere. And of course, again, knowing the future and knowing that they're actually broke is an interesting, way to watch, to go back and rewatch now. Yeah. But that's a naive thing for Ned to say, because he's not acknowledging that power is not. I mean, he should know at this point, Robert's the king, but doesn't actually have much power right now. I think that's clearer and clearer. He doesn't want it, so that's part of it. But there's more to it than that. And just because Robert is king doesn't mean Tywin's not actually the person running the realm here. Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening. And it's just, you just, Ned's doing what's right, but he's doing it the wrong way. And you see it as he's making all these declarations, and they're all for the good. You also can see the dominoes falling. You know that this is going to bite him in the ass. Like, I mean, even your first time watch, you know that this isn't going to go well.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Even six episodes into season one, even if you're not a book reader, you're kind of screaming, Baelish, the whole thing. I'm doing it for Cat and all that kind of stuff. But in this scene, it's so wonderfully over the top. Isn't that the Tully sigil?
Yeah.
You think anyone could? Why would they be? It's and the fact that Ned can't see it, like you said, he's just so like, I am here. This is my shot. This is like a Hugh Jackman musical. This is my time. I'm gonna be me, and I'm standing in for Robert, and I need to make up for a lot of things. And like you said, doing something right, maybe the wrong way, and it does kind of bite him in the neck, maybe. Ooh, too soon. A couple more here, then we'll start diving in here. Joffrey turns up the sweet factor on Sansa. It's sickening, but to me, I was watching this, I was like, this ties into this theme of the roller coaster going down, because poor Sansa is like, my dreams that I had, they're back on track.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just that she falls for it. To me, it's like, this is now her path to where she's going to end up on that, the dais there while her father's beheaded. Like, this to me is the moment where she's in now. She's hooked. He's got her. He played it, took the advice from his mom, very well. And to me, this is a slippery slope that now Sansa's sliding down to, which is sad, because I just, especially now on this rewatch, Rachel, I'm rooting for Sansa more than I ever did, because I know what happened,
Yeah. No, it's true, but yeah, they really set the stage well with the way that she treats her septa, and that really cutting, where are you from? Oh wait, I don't care. And it's like, oh, Cersei, when did you show up? It's important to remember and realize that as a 13, 14-year-old girl, caught up not only in a fairy tale, but in real life. It's a fairy tale in real life. She's expected to love and obey and cherish and, fawn over Joffrey in every way. And she also gets to be queen. So she gets to wear her hair the way she wants to. She gets to boss people around. She gets to be that epitome without realizing what that actually means. And she's just allowing herself to be manipulated. And Joffrey goes full tilt with it. So, I mean, it's not dissimilar to Peter manipulating Ned, like in different ways, but you're still getting that sense that the people who are really going after the power are using these naive Starks to get there.
Yeah, it was hard for me in a good way. I mean, in that good Game of Thrones way, hard for me to watch this time around. It's a scene I'm so familiar with, but now and especially when I was connecting it to these themes, just like, oh, Sansa, you're sliding down the slope. You don't even know. A couple more. I want to discuss at the end. We got a call to about Dany and what I think about that. But you brought up the excellent Robb and Theon scene, which leads to the free folks showing up, Osha, Stiv, and the gang causing problems for Bran there. That's its own scene. But the conversation before, I looked at this as a bit of a fatal mistake for Robb when you see what happens. And we get to know Robb more in the show than in the books. We know that. Theon, and you're right, great stuff about justice, and he's just spouting some words. He's a bit of hothead. He's got some problems. Theon's got some problems, but we know what's going into it. I think, and especially with what he does here, saving Bran, which is a moment that means more to me now as well, too, at the end of the show. Theon, you mentioned the identity crisis, which you're correct about. This is one of those moments where Theon has some, like, I'm a Stark to him, even if he doesn't say it. And Robb Stark just is kind of like, yeah, it ain't your house. And I'm watching this going, oh, Robb, if you had been softer there, if you had heard what he was maybe trying to say and not got hung up on your own responsibilities and your own discovery of who you are and who you're supposed to be with this newfound power and sense of justice, it might have gone differently. It might have gone differently. He might have sent you that letter instead of burned it.
Yeah, it brings it back to themes that you've talked about, too, the theme of duty. You know, Theon's trying to convince Robb to his point of view about this by saying it's your duty to your house to represent it when your father can't. And at that point, they know that Ned has been attacked and is, for all they know, incapacitated. And for Robb to turn back to him and say, yeah, that's great, but it's not your duty because it's not your house. That's the core of the identity crisis that Theon is going through. And this is really the first time we've heard him talk about the Iron Islands much. And it's tied into another theme that I'll bring up in a second. But the idea that, you know, he does have a past with a different house and a different group of people, yet he's basically been raised as a Stark and frankly treated like one for the most part. But it almost reminds you of like how Catelyn would dig at Jon. Robb's comment here sort of digs at that, you're not really one of us, you know? And it's echoed with like Viserys being like, oh, her son's not going to be a real dragon, not going to be a real Targaryen. It's like this whole idea of, you know, the family that you have and then the family that you choose, because we know that that is so important later, especially for Theon. But it's even hit on here again with Robert telling Ned, I hate my brothers. You're not supposed to hate your brothers. Right. You're the brother I chose. And so, you know, these family dynamics within the house names, but also with the people that, you know, become associated with those houses is always an underlying current with all of these characters. And this we see very clearly between Robb and Theon. And since we know where it goes, it's just, you know, it's heartbreaking because you know what the road he's going to go down and the things that he's going to suffer because he didn't truly feel like Stark when frankly, that's pretty much what he wanted.
It's when you look back, man, Theon's easy to hate. He really, and that's a credit to Alfie Allen as a performer. Easy to hate. But you go back and you watch this show from the beginning with all 8 seasons now. There's these little signposts along the way. I teed that up, and you just hit that down the fairway, almost right on the green. We're going to have an easy putt. Thanks, Rachel. That's some insightful stuff on that scene. All right, so I'm going to take the Dany thing that I want to bring up. I'm going to move it a little bit to the end because we got this call. I want to go back to your themes, but we're going to get to Dany. We're going to get to Dany. And also, by the way, I hadn't even realized that I'm making my notes the second time I was watching this episode today. It's like this is like 2 episodes in a row with no Jon Snow. I can't even imagine that. By the time we get to season 8, the fact that there wasn't Jon Snow in episodes seems really weird.
It's those early episodes would go episodes without hitting a major character. Yeah, you know, every single one. I think the only character we've hit every episode this season is Ned.
Right.
Everybody else has gone on hiatus for an episode or two because there are so many stories and they're all disparate stories. That's one of the crazy things about the first half of the series versus the second half, because I remember that momentum shift when characters started to come together. Characters that had never had any interaction before now are suddenly in the same space or in the same city or coming together and forming different kinds of alliances and whatnot. So, that's the trajectory of the show. But when you start, you're all over the place. And you couldn't do episodes that checked in everywhere because your scene would be minuscule and you wouldn't get the depth that you really need. I really like the balance, though. Like, I did not watch this episode and finish it thinking, I wish I had checked in with John. Like, I felt like we had the last time we checked in with him, we'd gotten the progress and the forward momentum, and Sam and everything that Tyrion taught him is all percolating in his head and he's working his way through things. So we know that's what he's doing up there. Yeah. Meanwhile, we're checking in with these people.
Yeah. And no, it's like, it didn't hit me. And it's so funny because, again, as I say a lot, and I get it, if you hear it over and over, I hadn't read the books going into this season. Coming out of it is when I really started diving into that. So I didn't know. I was taking the story as it just kind of flows out in front of me. So when Ned dies, a couple episodes later, our buddy, Christian Harloff, calls me, and he was in the same boat. Hadn't read the books, loved the show. And we're both kind of doing that, like, oh God, I can't believe Ned died. Like, what in the world? We're so used to just American television where everyone lives happily ever after. And Christian says to me, he goes, well, this has got to be Jon Snow's show now. And I remember thinking, like, really? Like, he's like barely in it. like just taking season one and not the whole scope of everything. I just didn't know. And just in that sense of just like, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I would think maybe Rob. So there you go.
It depends on where I think that's a temperament thing or what you lean towards. Like, I know I read the books, but I still think I would have leaned towards John because John is part of the fantasy aspect of the show, because you have the White and you have, which, is coming up in the episode, and he saves Mormont and they make the decision to go north. And, he's on the cusp of how the whole series started. There is a Game of Thrones happening, and we are so intrigued and entrenched in that, and it's got all of these characters that we love and we love to hate and we want to know more, and that's the core. But on the periphery are these fantasy elements, and which of Ned's sons is involved in which. Rob's involved in the politics and the grounded and the history, whereas John's involved in the fantasy and the bigger, larger looming threat. So to me, being the fantasy person that I am, always was like, that's going to be the big thing. I said from the beginning, all you people playing the Game of Thrones, you're not paying attention to the real thing. Like, this is not the important thing. There's another more important thing happening. But it's interesting and that's deliberate. It's to have the two sons of Ned, and what are they each going to do without him in the world? And, which story, will you glom onto?
No, great stuff. And you're making me think of the ocean line that's coming in the next couple episodes here of tell your brother he's marching the wrong way, where it always gets me like that nerd chill, like, oh no, there's something.
Like when she mentions Mance, it's such a throwaway, but it's like, what Mance would give us for him. And the others are like, we're not going back north, we're going south.
Yeah, as far south as south goes. All right. Other themes. Yeah, I know you got some other ones. We'll put that Danny thing at the end of this conversation. We got a great call to tag with that there. What are some of the other themes you got there?
There was another word that popped out a lot. There's two specific instances, but I do think this also, in a bigger sense, does tie into Danny and a lot of the characters. And I'll just call it what makes a man. Because in two different instances in this show, two different characters talk about when do you become a man? What is it, an age thing? Is it the first time you have sex thing? Like, what is it? Yeah. And Theon says that in the Iron Islands, you aren't a man until you've killed your first enemy. And so this is part of that conversation that he has with Rob, and then dealing with the wildlings and the aftermath of that. And clearly it's what Theon wants more than anything, is to be considered a man and to be considered important and relevant, and a part of things and a part of a family. Yeah. So he thinks that he has just crossed that threshold. What I think is interesting is in that moment, Rob is also killed, who I presume to be his first enemy. So Rob is also stepping onto the threshold of being a man, but he's a little bit more conflicted and reticent about it. And Theon also calls Bran a brave little man in that moment when Bran says that I can't feel it, I'm not hurt. Like he's putting on a brave face. And the compliment that Theon can think to give him is to call him a man. And then in a different scene, in the hunting scene, we know George Martin's least favorite scene. It's four guys walking through the woods. But Robert is digging at Renly because that's what big brothers do. And Renly has some great comebacks about, Robert's like, back in the day, it was so great and all this stuff. And he's like, back in what day? When the realm was at odds and 1 million people died? Or was it when the Mad King was burning women and babies because voices were talking to him? Or was it even before that, when dragons were burning whole cities? Like, when were things good back in the day, Robert? But Robert was saying that you become a man when you've slept with a woman from each of the 7 kingdoms. And then if you get the 8th, it's the woman from Riverlands. So that in Robert's head is what makes you a man. This is in Theon's head, what makes you a man. Ned from the beginning of the series making Bran watch the first beheading, like he's old enough to be a man. He's got to face these things. Like all of the younger characters are on that precipice, but it is as important to the older characters too, because Robert is talking about what makes you a man. That's not what makes you a man. In fact, you're not exhibiting any characteristics of being a man in the situation right now. You just ran away from the trouble in your capital to go on a hunt. You're not acting like a man. Viserys is having all kinds of trouble with this. And it's compounded by the fact that if you broaden this out, and it's not just about what makes a man, but it's what makes a leader, what makes a person someone that other people pay attention to and follow. So now we're seeing Dany take that role from Viserys, and that is
from him.
so emasculating for him and serious trouble for him ultimately. But it's this idea of all of these characters trying to make the right choices to be important and relevant and right, and they're all doing it in different ways, some right, some wrong. And it's just interesting to me to have them talk about it so literally, but then also in, I think, a lot of figurative ways too.
Yeah, I was going to divide that up, and it's just the conversation. You said leader, and that's a good way to talk about what's a leader, a ruler, and all that kind of stuff. And that's Dany and all those going forward. And that to me is a lot of Jon's story, but the literal side of it too, especially in a show that took some. We mentioned this is Jaina Essopson's only credit on the show. The show could have used more female writers in the room, particularly maybe late in the show's run. I totally agree with that. This is made slightly in a different era too. 10 years ago, our demands were, growing as an audience, maturing as an audience. For have this kind of show, which is swords and sex and violence and all those kind of things, to openly comment on what makes a man, and everyone in this episode who's proclaiming it is doing the opposite of that, or learn it. I think which excellent with Rob and Theon kind of balancing how to deal with it, because even talking about making the 8, as Robert's talking about it, he said something to Barristan Selmy, and Ian McElhenney plays it so well, because Ian McElhenney, Sir Barristan Selmy has already shown he's more of a man than Robert just in this season alone, just by his compassion for standing by Sir Hugh and just his reputation and not proclaiming it, the man who, has to say he's king is no king at all type of thing with Barristan. And Barristan just kind of says no, sir, I'm paraphrasing, but no, sir, I don't think I did that. Just kind of not needed for me, not what I got, not part of my makeup. And for the show, then to take that into Jon and Jon Snow's arc, the boy who would be king, who decides that isn't for me and becomes more of a quote unquote man through his compassion, his leadership, standing before the Night's Watch and going against their traditions and getting killed for it. It's there for the show. It is there. And it's something that I think I'm going to focus on even a little bit more. I'm so glad you brought it up, because it is in this episode a lot.
It's planting the seeds for it. And, in seasons to come, I just can't not think of Aemon, telling Jon to kill the boy. And, that's where we're leading with this. And that's, it's a different path for each of them. And, I love how they think it's one thing when they're starting out, but it's going to turn out to probably be something very different, specifically with Theon in this case, but eventually with Jon. I mean, and again, if we're taking the man out of it and we're just putting person in here, then we're definitely going to deal with this with Sansa and Arya, and Bran will get there too. Like there's this is a road that they all have to go down. But I did find it very interesting that it was so very specifically stated several times in this episode with that word and then that idea behind it.
It's close to my heart in a way, because I think some of these, when I talk Game of Thrones, I go to Star Wars. When I talk Star Wars, I go to Game of Thrones. But I think a lot of what George Lucas put out of Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker in the 80s. I always talk about, think of Rambo, think of Rocky, and that's nothing against Sly Stallone, but just think of what was going around in the 80s of what it is to be big, strong, and a man. And here's Luke Skywalker, smaller, slighter frame, literally throwing down his weapon and becoming a warrior in that moment and learning that's what it really is, not the journey. I'm going to go be a great warrior. And Yoda's like, that ain't going to make you great. And that's the message. And so many, no fault of anybody, so many can miss that. And Luke becomes the sword slashing hero that's going to go kick ass, which was never the point. I think there's some stuff in it's, probably, say in Martin's storytelling and Benioff Weiss and team, I think do a good job. It's there, but I've seen friends of mine. I have friends of mine who can misinterpret what Jon Snow is in a shot.
Yeah.
And that's the big, strong, manly Jon Snow in that classic sense. And I like that I like that you pointed out, Rachel, that because it's something I've had conversations about. If the show might be making more of a comment than people realize, and maybe they can focus on it going forward. Maybe. I don't know. What is a man? If you're out there listening or watching, what is a man? Ask yourself that question. Get that answer. But then also the global conversation, like you said, take the man out of it. We're going to deal with that going forward. So anyways, I'm really glad you brought that up. I didn't mean to step on your theme though. Any other thing?
Nope. Those were the big ones for me. Justice and what makes a man.
What makes a man? How many roads does a man have to walk before he's a man? All right. So the Danny of it all. This is a golden crown. This is the big moment. And we're going to run through some foreshadowing and favorite moments and stuff like that we always love doing on these episode rewatches. But we got to talk about Daenerys Targaryen eating that horse heart, becoming a Khaleesi in that moment. I love small favorite moment from you, Rachel. The look of pride and love on Khal Drogo's face when she almost chokes and barfs it up and then does it. And he's like, yes, that's my lady eating that horse heart. I love that moment. We talk about fatal mistakes and sliding down in the downward spiral. I would argue with myself that Dany, her roller coaster is still climbing. She's still got a long way to go. But the idea is maybe there is a bit of a slope that she's gone down and we don't really pick up on it as we're watching. Again, well, I'd say book readers, but even, we don't know where George is taking it after book 5 right now. We got a great call here, and this will start the conversation. I really, really want to get your thoughts on this because I value your insight into all of this, but specifically Daenerys Targaryen. So Jonathan has got a call here on the end of season 1, episode 6, and how it ties to season 8.
Hey, Ken and Casterly Talk. This is John. Thanks for taking my call a few weeks ago. So my thought this week was about the end of episode 6 with Dany's reaction to her brother's death. At the time, obviously, this was seen as such a cool moment. We finally got Viserys out of there. Evil dude. Dany looks badass. She's cool. But now when we connected to season 8, Tyrion's line, wherever she went, evil men died, and we cheered her on. For me personally, now, this is rewatching the scene for the first time. I really feel that connection to those words of I should have been paying more attention to Dany's reaction. Though her relationship with her brother is complicated and he was an evil man, the way she's so cold in his death really shows that she's now willing to take on that rulership. She has been for a few episodes now, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And I feel like this is the first step in that tragedy. What about you guys? Do you guys think this is really showing that connection to that line in season 8? And what are your thoughts? Thank you.
Great call, Jonathan. Great call. This is something that's been going through my head since season 8, Rachel. And you and I, broke down the show with Lon and Andres back in the day, and how I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. Let's take the producer choices out, the director choices, maybe some writing mistakes, whatever. I want to engage with the story. I think her fall is about also what how the world treated her just as much as her reacting, and not all of this is quote unquote her fault. There's a lot. This is complicated stuff. But I do agree with Jonathan. There's a bit of a slip here, and it's easy to cheer on this moment, as quite frankly, it's one of my favorite moments in the show. And I do every time get him out of here. So I don't think she's wrong. But looking back, even as in story, someone like Tyrion, this is an important moment to at least think about, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when she went Mad Queen in season 8, there was a lot of scrambling on most of our parts to look back and see if it added up. And like you said, producer choices, writing choices, and things that they did in season 8 aside, there are absolute landmark moments that you can see add up to her going Mad Queen, execution aside. So this is absolutely the first one. And it's so twisted because even on this rewatch, I still think she's right.
Yeah.
It's as I realized, it's as much about how Viserys has treated her, and specifically in this episode, the way, that he threatens her unborn child and everything else. Like he absolutely earned and deserved that end based on everything that he did.
Yeah. The sword to me he's done a lot and probably deserves, but that sword is his. You ain't coming back from that. That's your favorite.
Right. No, that you can almost see that turn on her face and the way she looks at Drogo when he comes over to her afterwards. And it's almost like a look of like, yeah, take him out. Like that he is absolutely dead to me now. What I think,
remember that thing we talked about, honey?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, you've got the thumbs up here. But I think it's also about what we're seeing in this episode, which is Ned and Catelyn and our heroes are slipping. They are not learning the lessons they need to learn in this harsh world. To get the right thing done, you might have to do some bad things. Mm-hmm. So it's bad things with good intentions. Mm-hmm. In storytelling across the ages, like it's always there. So we're watching our heroes not accomplish the good things. They're not going about it right because this world is so gray and full of greedy people, and everybody's trying to manipulate everybody else, and everybody's trying to get power. So you can't play by the rule book. Bronn didn't play by the rule book, and he won. Syrio Forel tells Arya, you can't be nice, and just because you're feeling troubled, then, your enemy's not going to attack you just because you're feeling troubled. That's not how the world works. Right. The world will pretty much only reward those who are as harsh as it is. So Dany does the right thing in a more authoritative way that actually accomplishes something important, whereas we're watching all of these other people fail to do that. Yeah. And I think that we're looking at her going, okay, finally, somebody we root for, whose heart is in the right place, who is digging herself out of the worst possible set of circumstances, and who is standing up for what is right. And she's doing it in an authoritative way. She's doing it now you look at it as emotionless, but I don't think that's necessarily the correct way to look at it. She's looking at it, this has to be done. Mm-hmm. And combined with everything else that goes on later, you can see that she gets to that emotionless place, or a misplaced version of her emotions, if you will. Yeah, but it's very telling to me that I think we all root for her so much in this moment, not just because of what's happening to her, but what's happening to the other heroes in the story as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you're hitting a home run there. That is, because to me, it's absolutely right. And all the other, what she does in Marine, what she does in Carthan. She's doing a lot of things, Yunkai and getting the Unsullied. It's all like, it's wins. And I don't think these are mistakes. It's just this building block to what's coming. Because again, I think a lot of it is just as much as what happens to her, and a comment on how they treat her, specifically a woman, a queen coming to this land. I think that's that quote I always bring up about Dinklage, that stuff is there. But to go back to this moment, I'm not conflicted at all. That guy deserved it. And it is my favorite thing to watch. But then you put it all together. You're like, all right, step one, not a wrong step, but step one, some step.
You can tell it's a slippery slope now. And if you are okay with this, then that makes you more okay to do this, what you did in Karth. And then if you're okay with that, then you're more okay with what you did in Astapor. And therefore, and so on, and so on, and so on. And it's the villain is a hero in their own eyes. They're doing the right thing in their own eyes. And the series as a whole proves that people like Ned and John and Kat and whatnot are in the right, and that they will win out in the long run to an extent, maybe not in the way that you suspect, but it's still the right way to go. But in this moment, we're like, damn it, Ned, what are you doing?
Yeah. And to Danny, excellent point. She's not feeling the water boil. I mean, she wouldn't, she's the dragon, right? But yeah, that line's starting to move. It's starting to move, and eventually that line's going to get so blurred, and maybe you don't know. And like you said, to justify it in your own mind, because again, this is justified. What a piece of crap! Get him out of here! What a death! One of my favorite moments.
My favorite of all, like the villainous characters. Look, Joffrey gets what's coming to him. Ramsay gets what's coming to him. Even Roose. There's some pretty nasty characters, and they all get some pretty spectacular deaths. But seriously, they did this in season 1, and they never topped it in my mind.
I don't think you're wrong, because I think my favorite death is Lady Olenna. Till Cersei was me. Oh. But this, in terms of just like, oh God, yeah, I like this show.
Poetic justice.
Yeah, and the sound and how they made it, the practical and all that kind of stuff, and Harry Lloyd. Harry Lloyd.
He's fantastic in this episode.
He's fantastic in the show, really, to set it up. All right, I think we've looked at our themes. Before we end up doing another 2-hour broadcast, we love talking about this. Let's talk about some important foreshadowing, some things with more meaning, big and small, and then we'll get into some of our favorite moments, lines and scenes, and then we'll start looking towards episode 7. So, important foreshadowing from you, Rachel.
A lot of the stuff we talked with Theon and Rob. It's your duty to represent your house. It's not your duty because it's not your house. Well, this is, foreshadowing that Theon, if the Starks don't accept him, then he's going to turn to the house of his birth, and things are going to go not so great down that road. Syrio, I loved that scene in general. I could talk about it with, one of my favorite moments, but talking to Arya, and he just has all his Syrio lines, but the one that, ticks off the box of what's coming is, how can you be quick as a snake or as quiet as a shadow when you are someone else? So it's like it's an inverted no one. It's, you have to learn these things, because if you are Arya Stark in the moment when somebody attacks you and you're down or you're troubled or whatnot, you're not going to win. So you have to become something else in order to be the fighter that you need to be.
Yeah.
I wish to confess my crimes from Tyrion, just because he gets to do it again later on in one of my all-time favorite episodes, which is the trial, Laws of Gods and Men. Tyrion was great in this episode with everything, but it's great to hear that, knowing, yep, this is going to come back in a much bigger way. And then the obvious one, he was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon. Yeah. She's going to prove that twice.
Yeah. And again, going back and really focusing on me watching this in 2011 and not seeing what's coming, starting to get into the story and all that kind of stuff. But I wrote down, Danny still ain't burning.
Yeah.
And the
egg moment too.
Here he is, but Danny isn't. And it's just the fact that at this point I didn't go, I wonder if she's a dragon. It just makes me embarrassed. It makes me embarrassed, Rachel. That's all there. Other ones for me. I don't know if you got some more, we can toss them in there. But just Ned sending out barracks on Darien. I know it's not Richard Dormer, but it's just one of those fun moments, and just to know what's coming with that, and the importance of that, how that kind of indirectly sends Beric on his path, and what Beric becomes to some of Ned's family later on in the final moments. Theon, we mentioned Theon saving Bran again. Just going back to God's Wood in season 8, just seeing that come full circle. Meet Nosha, all that stuff. You mentioned the White Walkers. They're kind of mentioned again. Mance and the White Walkers. You forgot about them. Oh, did you forget about them from the opening of episode 1? They're still here. It's still going. Yep. And then I love too, because again, as a non-book reader in this point, 2011, that the three-eyed raven is just kind of literally telling us a bunch of stuff. And we're going down the crypts. Nothing going to go good for the Starks. And you're just kind of like, oh, cool. Raven's got 3 eyes. I feel embarrassed going back to a 2011 self. So any other foreshadowing things with more meaning for you there?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
There was not as every episode's full of them, but this one didn't have as many of those. Oh, last look and this and that. So horrible episode. No, actually one of my favorites. Yeah. Favorite moments, lines, and scenes. We talked a lot about the Theon and the Rob scene. It's not your duty because it's not your house. It's just one of those like, I get it, Rob. I get it, but come on, man. I love too that Bran just has a trait of blurting out who he is, even to his own detriment. I'm Bran. Shut up, kid.
Yeah.
Moments for you as well, lines, scenes.
Yeah, everything about the Rob and Theon thing struck me really hard this time. Knowing the trajectories and even after Theon saves Bran's life, the way Rob reacts was the way that you shot that arrow. You could have impaled Bran too, and he's not as happy or grateful as Theon clearly wants him to be in that moment. And again, it's Rob in that moment with Bran being threatened lays down his sword.
Yeah,
that's not something Theon would do. And so again, it's just the disparate ways of dealing with situations, and how that's going to inform both of their journeys as they move forward. And I think that it's kind of a smallish scene, but it resonates so much more for me on this rewatch than it has before.
It's same. I don't know what it is, Rich. Same. This sequence, because I've always focused on it for Bran and Osha and that stuff there, and loved everything with Theon and Rob. But it jumped out to me a lot more this time around.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing this. We got to get to. I got to call about the God of Death scene. This is one of the all-time classics. It's on T-shirts, for God's sakes. Yeah. Donald Long is got a great call here about that there. And I do have to say, Donald Long, thank you. He's a longtime listener here to Casterly Talk. He gifted me the "A Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon" book that's out now from James Hibbert at Entertainment Weekly. So I'm going to start reading and really find out what George R. R. Martin thinks about all those scenes, Rachel.
Nice.
So here we go, Donald. Thank you for that, and thank you for the call. Here we go.
Hey, Casterly Talk. Just wanted to call in and get some extra highlight to the quote we hear in this episode. There's only one God, and his name is Death. And then what do we say to God of Death? Not today. And it became one of the most famous and recognizable quotes of the entire series. And it came out of the scene where Arya doesn't really have anything else going for it, to be honest. And it really is, quote, mostly associated with Arya, and she has something that she holds on to and follows throughout the rest of her journey, throughout the entire series, as she comes, if you want to say, proprietor of death. And it comes almost full circle in season 8 when she stares almost death and God of Death in the face, if you want to call him that, the Night King, in the final episode. And then I just want to give some extra love to the image that we see in this episode, Ned Stark sitting on the Iron Throne. I think the first time we see somebody sitting on the Iron Throne in the series. Well, what could have been? Thanks.
What could have been? What could have been? Just toss Jamie out of there and sit there before Robert shows up. Yeah, this God of Death scene. The idea of Arya becoming the angel of death, so to speak, or in this case, the God of Death, especially after what Melisandre says, early on, and was it season 3 of like, I see you extinguishing many eyes, and then we know what's happened. I don't know. I like that kind of take.
Yeah, I do too, and I also like that. As she becomes an angel of death and an arbiter of death in very serious ways. But I also, before she gets there, I always took it as she takes this as a mantra. What do you say to the God of Death? Not today. And that's what gets her through the hard moments. And she should have been captured or killed so many times, but she has an inner strength and an inner will to fight those situations, find her way out of it any which way she can. And it eventually leads her to the House of Black and White, and then, a more intimate relationship with the God of Death, if you will. But I like the last part of the mantra, not today. I feel like that is so wrapped up in her approach to surviving all the way through this to the end.
absolutely. And it comes to you in season 1.
Yeah.
In this water dance and stuff. Yeah, I love it. This is what I love looking back there. Some other moments for me, Goldwyn wins wars, not soldiers, like you mentioned. Love that quote. I love everything about Tyrion at the Eyrie. I love everything, even his communications with Mord and everything going on there, which you say, again, the Lannisters, their gold and all that stuff is really thrown in our face here. But his trial by combat remains one of my favorite sequences of the show. And this episode just, again, has some of the most memorable, but for me personally as a fan, just the Crown for King scene, a lot of stuff going on with Ned and the Tyrion stuff and Bronn, because I just love Bronn so much, and I'll stand for the dwarf is a pretty underrated line for me of just like, yeah, you will, someone will. So I just love the sequence. And whenever I do a rewatch, and I'm like, okay, because you're like, all right, it's a lot of episodes, I have to get through that. Like, oh, I get to go back to the Eyrie and watch Tyrion get freed. I love this sequence, Rachel. I don't know. Maybe I like the brutality. I don't know what it is, or the justice. Maybe I like the justice.
It's what's great about it too is we don't get a ton of action like that in season 1. No. In the fight choreography and the idea behind it. We saw the fight last week, but what is so great about this fight and the way that it was choreographed and the way it was played by both actors and everybody else in the scene too is that it's so demonstrative of how Bronn operates. Yeah. I'm not going to wear armor. I'm not going to use a shield. I'm going to duck out of the way. I'm going to make you hit columns with your sword. I'm going to throw guards in your face so that I can get out of the way. I'm not going to fight by the rules. And it's so well executed in that space with those people and the moon door there and the way Liza and Robin and Catelyn's face, they always cut to her at the exact right time. She sees this slipping through her fingers as it's happening. And it's just a great sequence for all that it's saying, literally, because it's going to free Tyrion, but also about the characters and their lives and who's on top and who's got the power and how you lose it, and the small folk versus the high noble houses. Like, to have that many layers going on in a scene is pretty impressive.
And it's well edited.
Agreed.
And it contains also one of my favorite little runners there with Tyrion saying, I once brought a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel, a joke he tries to finish 5 seasons later. Yeah. And you can look online and find out the whole story there. Other tiny moments, and I want to hear some from you. Viserys, not Varys, Viserys, for as bad as he is, and we don't like him. I do love that when Daddy's eating the heart of the horse, and he's like, hope that wasn't my horse. It's a low-key funny moment for me. Which also, so my final thing, I'll stop blabbing, Rachel. I'm a Jorah guy. You know that. Everyone, the whole world knows that. And yet here I stand is one of just those. There, you want to know who a man is? Jorah's got some lessons to learn. He swims in his failure. He swims in his self-loathing. He swims in his mistakes, and he makes a lot of them. He'll continue to make some of them. But this is one of the best Jorah moments.
Yeah, I meant to mention that when I was talking about what makes a man, because it's so it's so honest.
Yeah.
Like he recognizes the truth of what Viserys says. He also knows the truth about his entire situation, which we don't know yet, but we know now, looking back on it. And so and yet here I am is so calm and certain in that moment that he is doing the absolute right thing in that moment to not let Viserys steal the eggs and take off. It's, a man owns his choices and his mistakes and his situation, and to be that clear about it's a really great delivery of that line. I agree with you.
Doesn't loyalty mean something to you? It means everything to me. And yet here you stand, and yet here I stand. Oh God, I love it. Jorah, you break my heart sometimes, but I love you. Any other favorite moments or lines from you, Rachel?
I love, if we're talking Viserys, because I think that it's just applicable to the series. The line that Viserys has is, who can rule without wealth or fear or love? And every character who is after power is trying to find the answer to that, to find the balance of that. Dany in season 8, when she's got her council of people and Olenna's telling her one thing, and Asha's telling her not Asha, Yara is telling her something else. And everybody is telling you what the best way to rule is. And the series sort of ends with a human being can't do it. So we're going to put, the three-eyed raven up there, because at this point we have learned every type of human being has tried to rule this land, and every last one of them has either been corrupted by power, even if they had good intentions, or was killed because of it, or was, manipulated, or was there's always an or. There's always a this is a pretty much impossible job. And it's really interesting to me that it's Viserys who delivers that, because he's the one struggling, because he's watching Dany win over the Dothraki in a way that he has never experienced. People have fawned over him, but not in any kind of genuine way. And yet these people love her. And his delivery of that line too is like so incredulous and hurt. I'm like, he's such a little boy in that moment of like, I don't understand. That was supposed to be me.
Yeah. Yeah. God, this is a great episode.
It really is.
And as Arya says, 7 hells to Sansa. Any final moments for you?
Nope. Well, okay. What is the one? There's the Tyrion at the Eyrie, as you mentioned, is incredible. But one of the things that he does with he's trying to argue with Mord and trying to get his point across. And like the first attempt, he's trying to say he has gold, and Mord's like, it's not on you, so shut up, and leaves. And the second time, Tyrion's like, okay, how do I outthink a stupid person? How do I like get him to do what I want? And my favorite Tyrionism is, I don't have the gold. Sometimes possession is an abstract concept. It's like so true and so Tyrion, but so lost on somebody like Mord.
and so true for the Lannisters, as we learn here. All that stuff is the best, which is why one of the episode stars, we always like to talk about specific episode stars. I say Jerome Flynn, but also Peter Dinklage, and he'll probably get that episode award from us a lot during the series. But this is some great work, man, with what's going on at the Eyrie. I love it all.
Yeah, it's Tyrion being very Tyrion, outthinking his situation, manipulating the people around him, Lysa, Catelyn, Vardis, even Bronn to some extent. I mean, he didn't know Bronn was going to step up, but, that was the kind of person he was trying to appeal to in that situation, essentially like a greedy person who doesn't care about the honor and duty of it all. But I was going to give star of the episode to Harry Lloyd, because this is the last that we see of him. And I really love the battle that he has with himself. When she says, then you shall have it. And the change in his demeanor is like, like I said, he turns into like that little boy. Is like, that's all I ever wanted. Like, we're fine. Right. Like he just, it's that switch, and it's just the concept of the maturity that he lacks to be able to grasp the real situation of what's happening around him. But he had a lot of great scenes, and right up until the end, I thought that he's a great addition to the show for the short time that he was on it.
He was. No, it needed. It really sets the tone going forward. And his death, I talked about Jory Cassell in episode 5, his death in that fight with Jamie and everything. It's the first. It was for me. It was like, oh, a character I thought would be around is dead, and then Viserys. Again, not being familiar with the story, like, oh God, that got me, and still Ned gets me later on. Yeah. We got one call left here. We're going to talk about Robert's Truth from our friend Eric Monroe.
Hey, Ken and Casterly Talk. So episode 6, The Golden Crown, another great episode. I want to talk about the scene between Robert, Ned, and Cersei. Now, I am a Robert Baratheon fan, but I have to tell you, I absolutely cringe when he hits Cersei. I don't like it. He himself even says, I shouldn't have done that. I think that's a big reason why she tells Joffrey, a king should never hit his lady, because she was hit. So I never forget about the scene. Robert openly admits he never loved Stannis and Renly. He says to Ned, it's a horrible thing to say, but it's the truth. You're the brother I chose. And Stannis confirms it in season 2 that it was mutual. And of course, Robert also lets slip, how powerful Tywin Lannister is. Ned wants him to go after Jaime, and he's like, no, I'm half a kingdom in debt to his father. So it shows me that Tywin was always the true power in King's Landing.
And Tywin is coming. So I kind of kept this call for the end. We talked a lot about what Eric said, and Eric, excellent points. Yeah, tough scene to watch. And I generally, I like Robert. I root for him. I root for the man he once was and that he could be again, but he just makes some mistakes here. But as far as Tywin is coming, here comes Tywin next week. He's coming along. And it is interesting to really, this is the first real solid mention of Tywin's position in the land.
Yeah, this goes back to, Peter and Ned talking about, Goldwyn's wars, not men. And the idea that the hand, Ned doesn't realize it in the right way, the power that the hand wields. And Tywin Lannister was the hand for a very, very long time under Aerys. So, he's a master manipulator and person who understands that you do not have to be the most powerful person in the land ostensibly as the king to actually be the most powerful person in the land. And, all of the talk about Lannisters and gold and being in debt and Lannisters paying their debts and, always pay their debts. So it's, everything, the groundwork is all being laid for what is one of my favorite character introductions for anybody. When you get to that scene and whoever gets to cover that with you and whatnot, like Tywin skinning a deer as his introduction is one of the better, more brilliant, touches by the writers and the showrunners on this show. So,
I think it's going to have to be you, Rachel, next week. So clear your schedule. Here comes Daddy Lannister. He is on his way. All right, we are starting to wrap up here. Another look at an episode, a very important episode. Gosh, I really do love this episode of Golden Crown, episode 1, season 6. And next week, we are going to be looking at what I've always said, and I'm curious to go back and really watch this now after all 8 seasons are done. I've always said, and on the Collider show and on the Screen Junkie show, I always said that episode 7, You Win or You Die, was to me kind of the quintessential best episode, like what Game of Thrones can do and what it should do every episode. It sets high standards. So I don't know. I'm curious to go back and watch it and really take a deep dive into it. So Rachel, we'll work it off. If you're busy, but you got to watch Tywin skin a deer with me, right?
I would love to join you. We'll check in. We'll see how the work schedule goes. But
it's a busy week for all of us. All right, we're out of here in Casterly Talk, and one of the reasons it is very busy is this live show I'm preparing for. It's Riley's Cantina live Saturday night, October 10th, 7 p.m. Pacific. We are live streaming from El Cid on the world-famous Sunset Strip. Special guests, a lot going on, a world premiere, a music video from Eric Bass from Shinedown, surprises. You can go to ticketweb.com or go to kennapzok.com and get tickets there. And as we said up top, one of the guests, in fact, in person, in studio from El Cid, will be Rachel Cushing, talking Star Wars, because she loves that too. It's going to be a lot of fun. So Rachel, looking forward to that.
I am too. I can't wait to see you guys in person, to talk Star Wars, drink wine, and Zoom it all to all the fans out there. Thank you guys so much for supporting us in our various geeky endeavor shows. And as always, you can follow me on Rachel J. Cushing, Twitter, Instagram, all that jazz. And don't forget about Schmodown Backstage on Tuesdays. Me and Ben Bateman.
You and Bateman, Ben the Boss, doing that. Yeah, like Rachel said, give her a follow. You can also follow me at Ken Napzok or go to my website, kennapzok.com, for all the things I do. That is it for this week. We're going to go figure out how you win or you die when you play the Game of Thrones. We'll see you next week here on Casterly Talk.